Hey guys, so welcome to today's video. So today I'm just going to be discussing anxiety, my experience with it, and how I deal with my anxieties. So I'm going to be talking about like the short-term solution, so like if you're having an anxiety attack in that moment, what you can do, and then some long-term things you can do just to kind of manage your anxiety over a long period of time. So disclaimer, even though I do have a degree in psychology, I am not a psychologist and I cannot really offer therapeutic advice, so just keep that in mind. I'm just going to be talking about my experience and the things that I do to manage my anxiety. So I've always been a bit of a nervous child. I remember when we went to Europe on a trip, I was always the first one to worry that we're going to miss the bus or something, and my family actually used to make fun of me. They used to call me a little panic muffin. I've always been a bit anxious, and so I think my first experience of anxiety really came in my teenage years. So I think it's important to remember that anxiety is a normal feeling and it's a natural response to stress. But the thing is, when it starts to affect your life on a daily basis, then it can get really out of hand. So what does anxiety feel like? I think it's important to differentiate between anxiety, fear, and a panic attack. So fear, I think, is your body's natural response and natural instinct to danger. So if there's a snake, then you will feel fear, and that is a real instinctual response. If you go towards the edge of a cliff and you look down, your natural response will be fear, and your body will kind of like pull you back. Fear is, again, a completely natural response, and that is a response to danger. Anxiety is a lot more of an irrational fear. So you'll be faced with different scenarios in life that will make you quite anxious, but in your mind you might blow it out of proportion. So an example will be giving a speech or walking on stage for graduation. I remember for my very first graduation, I was so scared and anxious that I was going to trip on stage, and thank God that didn't happen. I think it was the size of my heels that made me feel that way. Like, I was worried, and I always just have a general fear of embarrassing myself in front of crowds of people. So I never like to give speeches in school either. So those kinds of things will always make me anxious, and that's more tied to a specific scenario. So anxiety for me is basically just a feeling of worry or feeling uneasy about something. And there's a lot of symptoms that can come with anxiety, like panicking, a feeling of dread, nervousness, restlessness. Like when I'm feeling anxious, I do struggle to sleep, so that's another symptom. I struggle to concentrate, and another thing, when I'm especially stressed out or anxious, I tend to get stomach ulcers as well. So digestive issues can be another symptom of anxiety. So this is different from a panic attack. So a panic attack is very intense, and it kind of just feels like you're about to die. So I've had a panic attack before. I've had quite a few actually, and I'll never forget the very first panic attack I ever had. I was in the gym and we were in a cycling class, me and my sister, and the music was just so loud and so overwhelming, and I couldn't explain what was happening. Like, all of a sudden I just felt like I couldn't breathe. I had like chest pain, I had palpitations, I had like this hot and cold feeling, and I basically felt like I couldn't breathe. I went to the bathroom, I felt like I was gonna have a heart attack, I felt like I was gonna die, I felt like I was gonna faint, all in one. So that's a panic attack. A panic attack is very intense and in the moment, where anxiety tends to build up and it's a lot more mental, and then that can lead to a panic attack as well. So this will obviously be different for each person. I have experienced both, where it is situational and then I'm anxious about specific situations, but then I've also had times when I'm just anxious about everything all the time. So how do I deal with my anxiety? For me, I've got both a short-term and a long-term solutions. So the short-term solution is focused more on getting out of that panicky state. So when I'm having an anxiety attack or a panic attack, these are the things that I do. So they're actually called grounding techniques. So this basically just involves your 5 senses, and you can use your 5 senses basically just to get out of that state of mind and to calm down in that moment. So using grounding techniques will help you to kind of decrease the intensity of those feelings by distracting you and actually helping you to focus on something in the present. So you'll use your 5 senses, so seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, and tasting. Those are your 5 senses, and you can basically use that to your advantage when you are having an anxiety or a panic attack. So I actually used grounding techniques in one of my panic attacks that I had a couple of years ago, and this was actually before I even really knew what grounding techniques were. So I was driving on the highway and I was in the fast lane. And again, out of nowhere, all of a sudden, I felt like I couldn't breathe, and I started feeling lightheaded. I started feeling nauseous, and I felt like, again, like I was having a heart attack, and I was gonna like either faint or like, I don't know, have a heart attack, die, swerve, I don't know. So I'm driving on the highway and I know that this is a dangerous situation, but I can't just stop in the fast lane. So I moved over a few lanes into the slow lane. So in that moment, all I did was grab my neck, and I literally just squeezed my neck, and then I took deep breaths. So 4 counts in and then 4 counts out, and then you do that for a few minutes just until you calm down. And basically what that does is it basically just stops your adrenaline from being produced at the rate that it's being produced. So when you're having a panic attack, your adrenaline is like building, and that makes you more anxious, because then you start to get those physical responses. You start to get the heart palpitations, you start to get shortness of breath, you start to get chest pain, and then that makes you believe that you are in fact having a heart attack. So one thing you can do is heavy breathing. You can basically adjust your breathing, because when you are having a panic attack, you tend to have short, shallow breaths. So it's important when you are trying to get out of that to have deep, slow breaths, and that will actually really calm you down. So another thing you can do, like I did, I grabbed my neck. So you can grab onto something and squeeze it. So that will involve your feeling of touch. Another thing you can do, you can look for something in your immediate environment, and you can look at maybe 3 or 4 things that you can describe, and that will again just distract you from what you're feeling, and it helps you to be more present and in that moment. So those are just a few grounding techniques that you can try when you are having an anxiety attack or a panic attack. That has really helped me. And another thing that I do in that moment is remind myself that this has happened before. I have had a panic attack before, I have had an anxiety attack before, I've felt this way before. So I kind of have to question my thoughts in that moment. Like, am I really having a heart attack? No, because this has happened before, and last time it wasn't a heart attack, last time I didn't faint, last time I didn't die. So I kind of try to talk myself out of it. So in terms of long-term solutions and habits that you can kind of incorporate into your life, the first one is to identify your triggers. So this is very important if you want to learn how to manage your anxiety long term, and it might need you to do some self-reflection. So try to think back on all of the times that you've either had a panic attack or an anxiety attack, and think of what triggered it. So for me, when I was on the highway, like my panic attacks, they are not triggered. I just randomly get them. Thank goodness I don't get them that much anymore. I think I've had about 4 or 5, but it has been greatly reduced since I've started implementing these strategies. You basically just have to learn how to get yourself out of that state of mind. And the first thing you have to do is identify your triggers. So for me, one of my biggest triggers actually is social media, and this is actually a very recent trigger. So I think it actually started just a few weeks ago when, you know, I was reading everything that's going on at the moment. I was reading the news, I was watching all of the video clips, watching all the stories, and it's very overwhelming. And not just the actual news aspect of it, but when you're on social media, you are basically looking at everyone's opinion of it as well. So people are busy discussing these topics and, you know, giving their commentary, and people are bashing each other, and it's just very overwhelming for me, so I really couldn't handle it anymore. And something that I had to do was step away from Instagram for a few days, and that really does help, even if it's not just deleting Instagram, even if it's just reducing my time online in general. So all forms of social media, I really have to just lately, I have to distance myself from it. And that's fine, because I know that that's what I have to do for my own mental health. So you need to determine whether this threat in your environment that's causing your anxiety is short-term or long-term. So maybe the trigger is something like drinking too much caffeine. So that happens to me. If I have too much caffeine or if I have too much pre-workout, then I don't sleep, first of all, and then I get anxious about the fact that I'm not sleeping, but then because I'm anxious, I don't sleep. So it's just a vicious cycle. And my sleep is actually something that I've struggled with for a very long time. It is getting better, thank goodness, but I am still working on that. Another short-term trigger could be a situational trigger. So maybe you have to give a speech, or maybe you have to perform in front of people. That can be a trigger for anxiety. That will just be performance anxiety. Another trigger for anxiety could be a long-term problem. So maybe you have a lot of debt, or maybe you just have a lot of financial stress in general. Maybe you don't have a job and you're unemployed, and that is a constant stress for you, and that can cause your anxiety to be a lot more frequent. So just identify your triggers, try to figure out what are the biggest stresses in your life, and then figure out a way to deal with that. The second thing that you can do long term is to understand your thought patterns. So like I said, anxiety tends to really blow everything out of proportion. So you'll have maybe something that you're stressed about, and then your mind will kind of just magnify it, escalate it, and make it so much worse. Anxiety is focused on the future. So usually it's something that you're stressed about happening in the future. Maybe you're anxious about finding a job, and you're worried that maybe you don't have enough qualifications or experience, and then that makes you anxious. So you really need to just look at your thought pattern and really think about what it is that you're saying to yourself, like, I don't have enough experience, or I'm not qualified and therefore I'll never find a job. Like, really think about that. Is that true? No, because a lot of people have proven that you can drop out of high school, you can have no work experience and start your own business. There's lots of ways to become successful and to get jobs without having those things. So look at the thought that you're having, or look at the belief that you're having that's making you anxious, and figure out, is this really true? Is this proven? Or is it just in my head? Anxiety is very irrational, and it will make you believe a lot of things that aren't true. So again, just think about, is this really the truth? So the third thing you can do to manage your anxiety long term is to take care of yourself and your body. So what do I mean by that? I mean getting enough sleep, first of all. I know if I don't get enough sleep, I am just exhausted. I'm a lot more moody as well, and overall I tend to get triggered a lot more easy by anxiety because everything is that much more overwhelming. Another thing you can do is make sure that you get regular exercise. So even if it's just taking a walk or doing yoga, really anything, because exercise, I think, helps you to really stay present and in the moment, because you focused on moving your body a certain way, you focused on the exercise, so that helps you to kind of distract yourself from the anxiety, but also it generates those positive hormones in your body, those happy hormones, the endorphins, and that will get you in a good mood immediately. So I think that's something that has helped me. So like I did mention in some of my earlier videos, taking long walks for me and listening to music has really helped to kind of keep me calm. And you know, lockdown hasn't been an easy time for anyone, I don't think, and it is a very stressful time. So I think keeping calm, keeping active is so important, and it will keep not just your body healthy but your mind as well. The fourth thing you can do is meditation. So if you haven't tried meditation before, it might be very difficult at the beginning. It's something I'm still a beginner at as well, but I think meditation, the point of it is to teach you how to be present and how to have those thoughts come to you, and then you just let go of it. So again, I'm not an expert. It's something I've actually just started, and I don't have a lot of experience, but I have heard a lot about meditation from other people, and I do think it is something you can use to manage your anxiety. So another thing you can do is journaling. So this is something that I have a bit more experience with. So journaling for me is a way to get my thoughts out of my head and onto paper, and what that really does is it helps me to process what I'm feeling and what I'm thinking. And I know that sounds super soppy and, you know, ugh, but guys, it really does work. When you have to, you know, take your thoughts and your feelings and put them down onto paper, you really have to think about what you're saying. And when you do that, it really does help you to process your emotions a lot better. And not just that, it helps you to reframe the situation. So a lot of the times my mind will be racing and I'll be feeling anxious, and I won't really know where this is coming from. But as soon as I really start to think about it and write it down, you can reframe it and you can see it from a different perspective. So that's just something I've noticed. You can go ahead and try it. And even if you just start with writing down, you know, what you're feeling on that day or something you're grateful for, that can be a starting point. And then from there you can journal about whatever it is you're thinking or feeling at that point in time. So the fifth thing that you can try long term is therapy. So seeing a counselor or a psychologist, that can help you to deal long term with all of the issues that may have led to your anxiety in the first place. So maybe there's a situation that you're stressed about that you haven't really worked through. Maybe you have some past traumas that you haven't dealt with. All of that can be a reason for anxiety to be there constantly in your life. So that is stuff you have to deal with, and therapy is a great way to do that. I saw a psychologist for different reasons, but I think seeing a psychologist and speaking about how you're feeling, what you're thinking, what you're stressed about, what's making you anxious, all of that will help you to cope with your anxiety better. And then the last thing I want to discuss is a bit controversial. So medication. I have taken medication for anxiety before, and honestly I don't recommend it. Reason being, the medications that I was given for anxiety, I was told at the same time that this medication is very addictive and that I can't be on it long term. So immediately I was just like, so I did take the medication, I tried it, and it really was not working for me, because the very first time I took my anti-anxiety medication, it made me very sleepy, very groggy. And even if you do go take a nap, when you wake up, personally for me, I didn't feel good. I felt very groggy, very fatigued, I had a headache. I just feel like rubbish basically. So if medication is something that you want to use, please do see a doctor about that. But personally, I don't recommend that long term. You can use that short term, maybe if it's like a panic attack or something, then you can definitely use medication for that. But long term, using it on a consistent basis, I really don't recommend, because it is highly addictive. But again, that's just my personal opinion. There is medication that you can take long term for anxiety, but I believe those are more antidepressants. And I have taken antidepressants before. I will be doing a separate video on that, because that's an entirely different topic. But overall, I think that there's better ways to deal with anxiety than using medication. But that's just my own personal opinion. You must do what's best for you. So that's it for today's video, guys. I hope you liked it. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, and please join me next time for a brand new topic.